Imagine handing a cigarette to a human who lived 1 million years ago. He probably wouldn't smoke it. He'd probably throw it into the fire, step backward, cover his face, and wonder why you were deliberately breathing the thing every animal tried to escape. Because for almost every creature on Earth, smoke means danger, a wildfire, a burning forest, a place where staying alive suddenly becomes much harder. Your eyes burn, your lungs ache, the air becomes difficult to breathe. Every instinct tells you exactly the same thing: run. So here's the mystery. If smoke was one of nature's warning signs, why did humans eventually decide to inhale it on purpose? Not just once, not just during rituals, but eventually, every single day. To answer that, we need to travel back, long before cigarettes, long before tobacco, long before agriculture, long before cities, back to a world where humans didn't create fire. They feared it. Nearly 2 million years ago, Africa looked nothing like the world we know today. Open grasslands stretched beyond the horizon. Scattered forests broke the landscape. Lightning storms rolled across enormous skies. And somewhere in the distance, a tree exploded into flames. Wildfires were common. Lightning, volcanoes, dry seasons. Nature constantly created fire, but nobody controlled it. For every animal nearby, fire meant exactly one thing: leave. Immediately. Our ancestors were no different. Early members of the human family, including Homo habilis, almost certainly treated fire the same way every other mammal still does today. With fear, the smell of burning wood, the heat, the thick black smoke, all activated ancient survival systems inside the brain. Those reactions still exist inside you. Imagine walking through a forest, then suddenly smelling smoke. Even before you consciously think about it, your attention changes. Your heart speeds up. You begin searching for danger. That reaction isn't learned. It's inherited. Natural selection rewarded ancestors who noticed smoke quickly, because the ones who ignored it often never had children. For hundreds of thousands of years, smoke wasn't interesting. It wasn't relaxing. It wasn't spiritual. It was simply information. Something nearby was burning. And burning usually meant leave now. But evolution has a habit of turning today's danger into tomorrow's opportunity. At first, humans didn't conquer fire. They followed it. After a wildfire passed, the landscape changed. Dead trees disappeared. Predators often avoided the burned ground. Fresh green plants soon returned. Small animals wandered into the open. Food became easier to find. Some researchers suggest that early humans may have learned to exploit these freshly burned landscapes long before they ever learned to create fire themselves. Not because they enjoyed flames, but because nature had accidentally prepared the land for them. Little by little, fire stopped being only an enemy. It also became an opportunity. Still, nobody was breathing smoke on purpose. Smoke remained. The unavoidable cost of getting close to something useful. And nobody yet realized that one day, human history would become impossible to understand without it. Then something extraordinary happened. Somewhere in Africa, probably close to 2 million years ago, a group of humans did something no other animal had ever managed. They stayed. Instead of running from the fire, they remained close enough to keep it alive. And from that single decision, everything changed. Not only our food, not only our nights, not only our brains, even the air we breathed would never be the same again. No one knows exactly who kept the first fire alive. There was no audience, no applause, no history books waiting to record the moment. Only a few frightened humans standing beside something every other animal feared. Most archaeologists believe that by around 1 million years ago, possibly even earlier, Homo erectus had begun controlling fire, at least in some places. The evidence comes from ancient hearths, burned animal bones, ash deposits, and stone tools found beside repeated traces of fire. It wasn't a one-time accident. Fire had become part of everyday life. And with that, humans made an invisible trade. They gained warmth, light, protection, cooked food, longer evenings, safer nights. But they also accepted something else: smoke. Imagine sitting beside a campfire every evening for years. There are no chimneys, no ventilation, no smoke detectors, only burning wood, and dozens of people gathered around the flames. Children, parents, grandparents, hunters repairing spears, families cooking meat, everyone breathing the same smoky air. Not because they wanted to, because there was no alternative. For perhaps the first time in evolutionary history, humans spent thousands of hours living inside smoke. Modern studies show that smoke from wood fires contains thousands of different compounds, tiny particles, carbon monoxide, plant chemicals, irritants. Many of them are unhealthy in large amounts. Ancient humans almost certainly suffered irritated eyes, coughing, and damaged lungs at times. But despite those costs, the benefits of fire were even greater. Cooked food became easier to digest. Parasites were reduced. Predators stayed farther away. Cold nights became survivable. Fire extended the day by several precious hours. Evolution didn't choose smoke. It chose everything that came with fire. And smoke simply became part of the package. Generation after generation, children were born beside campfires. They learned to crawl near warm ashes, to recognize familiar smells, to associate flickering flames with safety. Imagine the emotional contrast. Millions of years earlier, smoke meant run. Now, smoke often meant home. That shift may be one of the most remarkable psychological transformations in human evolution. The same signal that once warned of danger slowly became associated with warmth, family, food, and belonging. Not because smoke itself had changed, because humans had. This doesn't mean our lungs evolved to enjoy smoke. They didn't. Your body still reacts when smoke fills the air. Your eyes water. Your throat becomes irritated. Your breathing changes. Those ancient warning systems never disappeared. Instead, our brains learned something more complicated. Smoke could now mean two completely different things. A forest burning beyond the horizon, or dinner beside the campfire. Danger, or home? The brain had to learn the difference, and that ability would eventually prepare humans for something even stranger. Because once people became comfortable sitting beside smoke, it wasn't long before they started asking another question. What happens if we throw something else into the fire? That simple question would quietly begin changing human history once again. For thousands of generations, smoke was simply unavoidable. It came from burning wood, burning grass, burning animal fat. Humans accepted it. The same way sailors accept seawater. It wasn't pleasant. It was simply part of life. Then, someone noticed something strange. Not every fire smelled the same. Imagine a small camp somewhere in prehistoric Africa. The evening meal is finished. The flames are beginning to die. Someone casually throws a handful of green leaves into the embers. Instead of thick grey smoke, a sweet aroma slowly drifts through the camp. People look up. Children stop talking. Hunters turn their heads. The smell is different. Nobody planned an experiment. Nobody understood chemistry. But curiosity has always been one of humanity's greatest evolutionary advantages. Soon, someone tries another plant, then another. Some smell terrible. Some create thick black smoke that burns the eyes. Others release surprisingly pleasant scents. Without realizing it, humans had begun conducting one of the longest scientific experiments in history. Every landscape offered different plants. Some contained aromatic oils. Others released insect-repelling compounds. Certain resins burned slowly, filling the air with rich fragrances. Tree bark, leaves, seeds, flowers, roots. One by one, people discovered that plants could change the character of smoke itself. Not all smoke was equal anymore. Some attracted insects, others drove them away. Some made camps smell cleaner. Others simply smelled interesting. Modern ethnobotanists have documented hundreds of plant species traditionally burned by indigenous cultures around the world. Juniper, sage, cedar, sweetgrass, frankincense, myrrh, pine resin. Many of these plants contain volatile compounds that become airborne when heated. Some discourage mosquitoes. Others produce distinctive aromas. Some even have mild antimicrobial properties under certain conditions. Ancient humans didn't know the chemistry. They didn't need to. Evolution rewards useful observations, long before science explains them. Picture a humid summer evening. Mosquitoes swarm around the campfire. Then someone throws fresh green branches into the flames. Within minutes, the insects become noticeably less aggressive. Nobody writes down the result. Nobody publishes a paper. But everyone remembers. The next evening, they do it again. Knowledge spreads the oldest way possible. Not through books, through imitation. Children watch adults. Families copy neighboring families. Generation after generation. Useful traditions survive. Soon, burning plants was no longer just about producing heat. It became part of everyday life. Smoke kept insects away, preserved certain foods, masked unpleasant smells, marked gathering places, perhaps even comforted anxious minds through familiar scents. A campfire had become something larger than a source of warmth. It had become the center of human society. Then, quite unexpectedly, smoke began changing something else. Not the body, the imagination. Because once humans discovered that certain plants changed the smell of smoke, it wasn't long before they wondered, could smoke carry something invisible, a message, a memory, or perhaps a prayer? Something remarkable happened. Long before the first cigarette, long before tobacco fields, long before anyone understood what nicotine even was. Humans stopped looking at smoke as just smoke. Instead, they began seeing something impossible to ignore. Smoke rises, always upward. Unlike water, it doesn't flow downhill. Unlike rocks, it doesn't remain where it falls. Unlike animals, it seems almost alive. It twists, it dances, it disappears into the sky. To people who had no knowledge of atmospheric physics, that was mysterious. Very mysterious. Imagine standing beside a fire 5,000 years ago. You throw fragrant resin into the flames. Within seconds, a thick white column begins climbing toward the heavens. The wind catches it. The smoke curls and spirals, then vanishes into the clouds. If you believed that invisible spirits lived above, what would you think? Perhaps the smoke was carrying something upward. Your gratitude, your fear, your request for rain, your hope that someone, somewhere, was listening. Across thousands of years, many cultures reached surprisingly similar conclusions. Not because they copied one another, but because they all watched the same phenomenon. Smoke always seemed to travel toward the sky. In ancient Egypt, priests burned fragrant resins, such as frankincense and myrrh inside temples. The sweet smoke filled sacred spaces during ceremonies honoring the gods. The aroma wasn't simply pleasant. It became part of the religious experience itself. Visitors could see it, smell it, breathe it. The invisible became almost visible, thousands of kilometers away. Ancient civilizations in India also burned aromatic plants during religious rituals. Sacred fires became central to many ceremonies. Offerings disappeared into flames, while fragrant smoke drifted upward. Again, no one believed they were smoking for pleasure. The smoke symbolized communication, transformation, connection between the human world and something greater. Similar ideas appeared in ancient China. Burning herbs and incense became associated with meditation, ancestral remembrance, and spiritual practice. The smoke marked important moments, not because people needed nicotine, but because smoke itself had become meaningful. It had become a language. Then, across the Pacific Ocean, another extraordinary tradition emerged. Among many indigenous cultures of the Americas, certain plants were deliberately burnt, not only for their aroma, but also because some contained powerful psychoactive compounds. For the first time in human history, smoke wasn't simply surrounding the body. It was beginning to influence the mind, and among all those plants, one would eventually change global history forever. Its name was tobacco, but before tobacco conquered the world, it was something entirely different. It was sacred. If tobacco had never existed, humans would still have gathered around fires. They would still have burned fragrant herbs. They would still have filled temples with incense. Smoke had already become part of human culture. Tobacco simply changed the story. Unlike many aromatic plants, tobacco did something unusual. When its leaves were dried, then burnt, the smoke carried a powerful chemical into the lungs, nicotine. Today, scientists know nicotine binds to specialized receptors inside the brain. But the first people who encountered tobacco knew nothing about receptors. They only noticed the experience, a strange feeling, heightened alertness, calmness, sometimes dizziness, sometimes deep concentration. sometimes a powerful sense that ordinary reality had shifted. That was enough. Archaeological evidence suggests that people in the Americas were using tobacco thousands of years before Europeans ever arrived. Exactly when this began is still debated. Different discoveries point to different dates. Some evidence suggests tobacco may have been used more than 8,000 years ago. Other findings indicate that widespread cultivation happened much later. As new archaeological discoveries continue to emerge, the timeline is becoming clearer, but not every detail has been settled. One thing, however, is widely accepted. Tobacco did not begin as an everyday recreational habit. It began as something special. Many indigenous cultures treated tobacco with extraordinary respect. It was offered during ceremonies, used in important agreements, burned during healing rituals, presented as gifts, shared before difficult decisions. Sometimes smoke symbolized gratitude, sometimes remembrance, sometimes communication with ancestors or spiritual beings. The exact traditions differed enormously from one culture to another. There was never one single indigenous way of using tobacco. But across many societies, it was not viewed as an ordinary plant. It was powerful, and powerful things demanded respect. Perhaps the most surprising fact is this: people were not constantly smoking. There were no convenience stores, no packs in every pocket, no factories producing billions of cigarettes. Tobacco was often limited by geography, season, preparation, and cultural rules. Its use could be highly structured, sometimes reserved for elders, sometimes for spiritual leaders, sometimes only for important ceremonies. The relationship between humans and tobacco was very different from today. Then, history took an unexpected turn. In the late 15th century, European explorers reached the Americas. Among the many unfamiliar plants they encountered, one attracted immediate curiosity. Local communities were inhaling smoke, deliberately. To Europeans, it looked strange, exotic, almost unbelievable. They had seen incense. They had seen sacred fires. But this was something entirely new, so they brought the plant home. At first, almost nobody could have imagined that this unfamiliar leaf would eventually become one of the most influential plants in all of human history. When Europeans first encountered tobacco, many believed the plant itself possessed mysterious powers. Some called it medicine. Others believed it sharpened the mind. A few even thought it could cure disease. They were wrong. But they weren't completely imagining the experience. Something real was happening inside the brain. They simply had no way of seeing it. Imagine inhaling tobacco smoke for the very first time. Within seconds, tiny nicotine molecules travel deep into your lungs. Unlike food, they don't need to pass through your stomach. Instead, they cross the thin air sacs of the lungs, enter the bloodstream, and race toward the brain. The journey takes only a few seconds. Long before you consciously recognize the taste, your brain has already noticed the chemical. Inside the brain, nicotine attaches to proteins called nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. These receptors already exist for a completely different reason. Normally, they respond to acetylcholine, one of the brain's own neurotransmitters. Acetylcholine helps regulate attention, learning, memory, and muscle activity. Nicotine just happens to fit those same receptors. Not perfectly, but well enough to activate them. In other words, the plant didn't evolve to target humans. Humans simply possessed a biological system that nicotine could influence. Once those receptors become activated, the brain begins releasing several neurotransmitters. One of the most important is dopamine. People often call dopamine the pleasure chemical, but neuroscientists now know that's an oversimplification. Dopamine isn't simply about pleasure, it's about learning, prediction, motivation. It teaches the brain this experience might be important. When dopamine appears repeatedly after the same behavior, the brain starts paying attention, very close attention. From an evolutionary perspective, this system was incredibly useful. Imagine finding ripe fruit after days without food, or discovering fresh water during a drought, or finally killing a large animal after a dangerous hunt. Your brain needed a way to remember those valuable experiences. Dopamine helped build those memories. It encouraged you to repeat successful behaviors. Without that learning system, our ancestors would have struggled to survive. Nicotine quietly slips into that ancient circuitry. The brain interprets the chemical as meaningful, important, worth remembering. After repeated exposure, something subtle begins to happen. The brain doesn't simply enjoy nicotine, it starts expecting it. Receptors gradually change. Some become less responsive, others increase in number. The brain slowly adjusts to the chemical's constant presence. Scientists call this neuroadaptation. It's one reason nicotine can produce dependence. Not because the brain is weak, because the brain is doing exactly what evolution designed it to do: adapt. And here's the remarkable part. The same learning system that once helped humans remember safe water, reliable food, and trusted companions can also learn to anticipate tobacco. The circuitry isn't broken. It's being redirected. Evolution never prepared humans for concentrated nicotine delivered repeatedly throughout the day. That situation simply didn't exist for almost all of human history, which raises an even bigger question. If tobacco was once rare, how did it become one of the most widespread habits on Earth? The answer has surprisingly little to do with biology and almost everything to do with civilization. For thousands of years, tobacco remained just another regional plant. If you lived in Europe, you had probably never seen it. If you lived in Asia, you almost certainly knew nothing about it. Entire civilizations rose, built cities, invented mathematics, crossed deserts, and never encountered tobacco once. Then, in 1492, history changed. When Christopher Columbus and his crew arrived in the Americas, they were searching for spices, gold, new trade routes. Instead, they found something nobody in Europe expected: local people, deliberately inhaling smoke. Several members of Columbus's expedition described seeing indigenous people carrying burning bundles of dried leaves, drawing the smoke into their mouths, then releasing it slowly into the air. To European eyes, the practice seemed bizarre. Why would anyone willingly breathe smoke? Ironically, they were asking exactly the same question our prehistoric ancestors might have asked thousands of generations earlier. Curiosity spread quickly. Explorers carried tobacco seeds back across the Atlantic. Botanists began growing the unfamiliar plant. Physicians experimented with it. Some believed it cured headaches. Others prescribed it for stomach problems. A few even claimed it could protect against the plague. Today, we know those medical claims were unsupported. But at the time, scientific medicine barely existed. Many treatments relied more on observation than controlled experiments. And tobacco produced noticeable effects. That alone made people curious. Then economics entered the story. European colonies discovered that tobacco could be grown on a massive scale. Demand increased. Plantations expanded. Ships crossed oceans carrying dried leaves by the ton. What had once been a sacred ceremonial plant slowly became a commercial product. The transformation was enormous. For thousands of years, tobacco had often been used sparingly, within cultural traditions that gave it meaning. Now, it was becoming merchandise. Something bought, sold, advertised, taxed. The Industrial Revolution accelerated everything. Machines could roll cigarettes faster than any human worker. Factories produced millions, then billions, of identical cigarettes. Packaging improved. Transportation improved. Global trade expanded. For the first time in history, nicotine became available almost everywhere, almost all the time. Evolution had never prepared the human brain for unlimited access. The 20th century changed the story again. Advertising became extraordinarily powerful. Posters showed confident doctors, elegant celebrities, successful athletes, movie stars, all holding cigarettes. Smoking wasn't presented as a rare ritual anymore. It became associated with sophistication, freedom, adventure, even health. Many of those advertisements now seem astonishingly misleading, but at the time, millions of people believed them. Eventually, science caught up. Large epidemiological studies began revealing clear associations between long-term tobacco smoking and serious disease. Researchers continued investigating, collecting larger data sets, repeating observations across different populations. As the evidence grew stronger, public understanding slowly changed. Governments introduced warning labels. Advertising restrictions appeared. Public health campaigns expanded. Smoking rates declined in many countries, although not everywhere. Looking back, the contrast is extraordinary. One plant, used respectfully by many indigenous cultures for specific purposes, had become a global industry worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The plant itself had not changed. Human society had, which leads to one final question. If humans didn't evolve to smoke, why was it possible for tobacco to influence us so powerfully in the first place? The answer takes us back to the campfires of our ancestors. So, when did humans first smoke? The honest answer depends on what you mean by smoke. If you mean breathing smoke accidentally, the answer is probably close to 1 million years ago, perhaps even earlier. The first humans who gathered around campfires had no choice. Smoke surrounded them every evening. It became part of ordinary life. If you mean burning plants on purpose, that came much later. As humans experimented with herbs, tree resins, leaves, and aromatic woods, smoke became useful. It kept insects away, marked ceremonies, filled sacred spaces. Eventually, it became part of religion, medicine, and culture. If you mean smoking tobacco, that's a completely different story. That practice developed thousands of years ago. Among indigenous peoples of the Americas, it emerged within specific cultural traditions, with meanings far deeper than simple recreation. Only after global exploration, trade, and industrialization did tobacco become the worldwide product we recognize today. Three very different stories, one shared element, smoke. And perhaps that's where the biggest misunderstanding begins. People sometimes say humans evolved to smoke, but evolution tells a very different story. Humans never evolved. To inhale tobacco, humans evolved. To live with fire, those are not the same thing. Our ancestors gathered around campfires because fire dramatically improved survival. It cooked food, protected children, scared away predators, extended daylight, created places where people could cooperate, tell stories, laugh, and build relationships. Smoke simply came with the fire. It was the price of everything fire made possible. Tobacco arrived hundreds of thousands of years later. By then, the human brain already possessed ancient learning systems, ancient reward systems, ancient survival circuits. Nicotine didn't create those systems. It interacted with them. Evolution built the lock. The tobacco plant happened to carry one of the keys. In a strange way, the history of smoking isn't really about smoking. It's about curiosity. Humans were never satisfied with simply surviving beside fire. They experimented, observed, copied one another, burned different plants, asked new questions, turned accidents into traditions, traditions into rituals, rituals into industries, and industries into one of the most influential habits in modern history. Imagine returning to that first Homo erectus campfire. The flames crackle softly. Children laugh nearby. Someone places another branch onto the fire. Smoke rises slowly into the night sky. Nobody there could possibly imagine that one day, millions of years later, entire cities would glow with tiny burning leaves, held between human fingers. They only knew one thing. Fire meant survival. Everything that came afterward was written by civilization, not evolution. The next time you see smoke rising into the sky, remember, long before it became a product, long before it became a habit, long before it became a controversy, smoke was simply the silent companion of the fire that helped make us human. And perhaps the strangest chapter in this story isn't that humans learned to smoke. It's that a species which first feared fire eventually learned to carry it in the palm of its hand. Thank you for watching Sketching Humanity. If you enjoy exploring the hidden evolutionary stories behind everyday human behavior, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, what ordinary human habit should we travel back in time to investigate next? We'll see you in the next journey through human evolution.